US President Donald Trump has accused the leaders of China, North Korea and Russia of conspiring against the United States as they gathered in Beijing for a massive military parade. Xi Jinping was joined by Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong in a show of strength as China unveiled new weapons at the event to mark 80 years since the end of World War II.
If China wanted to send a message to the world, it was heard loud and clear by anyone watching the scenes at Tiananmen Square today. As the world's largest army showed off its muscles for everyone to see. An enormous crowd gathered in Beijing's central square at a military parade to mark 80 years since the defeat of Japan in World War II. China's impressive military weaponry was central stage, including laser weapons, nuclear ballistic missiles, stealth bombers and giant underwater drones. In the stands, President Xi was flanked by Russia's Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Kim Jong. Dozens of other world leaders were also in attendance, but India's Narendra Modi was notably absent. He attended the summit in Tianjin earlier in the week, but given that China has been supplying India's rival Pakistan with military equipment, chose not to attend the parade. At a lunch reception, President Xi said that China was on the right side of history and told all countries to value peace and work together, and in an apparent jibe at the US president, said the world must never return to the law of the jungle where the strong prey on the weak. Donald Trump said he felt slighted that the US wasn't thanked for its key role in defeating Japan.
I thought that the United States should have been mentioned last night during that speech because we helped China very, very much.
Vladimir Putin has invited Kim Jong to Russia and praised the North Korean soldiers who have been fighting alongside Russian soldiers in Ukraine. It was the first time the Chinese, Russian and North Korean leaders met in public and clearly sent a message of an alternative to the US world order, with China and Xi Jinping at its head. Fergal Gallagher, RTE News.
We've been discussing the events in Beijing with Irish journalist Dimitri Sevastopoulou, US-China correspondent with the Financial Times. I began by asking him what message the display was designed to send.
Well, I think Xi Jinping and the other leaders who attended the parade are trying to send a message to the West that they are no longer going to be pushed around or bullied. And if you think about it, China and India have both emerged as great powers. Putin continues his full-scale invasion of Ukraine 3 years on. US hopes of getting North Korea to abandon its nuclear weapons have essentially disappeared. And overall, potentially with the exception of Russia, each of the three countries, India, China, and North Korea, is in a much stronger position versus the US than it was during the first Trump administration. So I think that's the overall message to the US and to the Western powers.
Now, President Trump took to social media to complain that China was conspiring against the United States, which might be a bit of a stretch. But do the events highlight that China seeks to offer an alternative to other countries in the world to American leadership?
Well, I mean, China has no real allies in the sense that the US has allies with mutual defense treaties. But I do think the gathering in Beijing showcased how Xi Jinping is making common cause with leaders of rising powers, many of them authoritarian. And I think the absence of leaders from Western major democracies at the parade underscores the tack that Beijing has been forced to take increasingly as US-China relations have spiraled downwards in the last few years.
OK, now President Xi said the world faces a choice between peace and war. Now, given that this was his country's, I think, his largest military display ever, and it had all sorts of military hardware on display, from underwater drones to robotic wolves and so on. I mean, given that show of force, is there a worry perhaps about China's own intentions?
There is, and in recent years, concerns have grown that Xi Jinping at some point down the road may decide to attack Taiwan, over which Beijing claims sovereignty. And, the rhetoric about China taking the road of peace is kind of boilerplate Communist Party rhetoric. It's contradicted by the actions that the People's Liberation Army in recent years are taking around Taiwan, where they're conducting increasingly aggressive and assertive military maneuvers that US military experts and generals say is actually a rehearsal to attack Taiwan at some point in the future. So Xi Jinping talks a great game about peace, but the PLA is preparing for a possible invasion of Taiwan at some point in the future.
OK, Dimitri Sevastopoulos of the Financial Times, thank you indeed for joining us on 6-1.
Thank you, David.